matrixed organizations are the enemy of generative AI, because how do you scale anything, right? The whole point of this transformation is that intelligence will now scale, and most organizations are just not set up for that.
Welcome to Founded and Funded. I'm Vivek Ramaswami, and today I have the pleasure of hosting May Habib, co-founder and CEO of Writer, a 2023 IA40 winner. Writer is a full-stack generative AI platform helping enterprises unlock their critical business data to deliver optimized results tailored to each individual organization. In this episode, May shares her perspective on founding a GenAI company before the ChatGPT craze, building an enterprise-grade product and go-to-market motion with 200% NRR, and whether RAG and vector DBs even have a role in the enterprise. This is a must-listen for anyone out there building in AI, and if you're watching on YouTube, please make sure to hit that subscribe button. With that, here's May. So May, thank you so much for joining us. And, to kick us off, we'd love to hear a little bit more about the founding story and your founding journey behind Writer. And speaking of, you founded Writer, before this current LLM hype, before ChatGPT and in this sort of pre-ChatGPT era, we like to call it. And so much has changed since then. So what is Writer today? What is the product? What are the main value propositions for the customers that you're serving? We'll get into the enterprise customers, this great list that you have, but maybe just talk a little bit about what Writer is actually doing and how you're solving these problems for the customers you're working with today.
Writer is a full stack generative AI platform. So right now, most of the market is selling folks either API access to raw large language models or productivity assistance. And there's lots of room for inside of companies for using both types of solutions, different use cases. But for team productivity and shared workflows, there's a real need to hook up LLMs to unstructured data, to do it in ways where there are real guardrails around the accuracy risks, the hallucination risks, the brand risks, the compliance risks in regulated industries. And the time to value when you're building things like synthesis apps, digital assistant apps, insight apps, there's a real need to capture end user feedback. And so by putting all of that in a single solution, we have drastically sped up time to market on folks spinning up really accurate, ready to scale applications. Doing that in a secure way, we can sit inside of a customer's virtual private cloud. And so we've had to be able to build that. We've had to own every layer of the stack. So we build our own large language models. They're not, fine-tuned open source. We've built them from scratch. They're GPT-4 quality. So you've got to be state of the art to be competitive. But we've hooked up those LLMs to the tooling that companies need to be able to ship production-ready stuff quickly.
Amazing. And let's dive into that. I think that's really interesting. You talk about Writer has built their own models, right? And this has been a big part of the moat that Writer has built. And I think this is something that we'll touch on, but we continue to see as so important as being able to own your stack, given how many different technologies we see competing on either end. And so in terms of building your own models, what did that entail for how you thought about building this company from day one? And how would you describe what Writer has done around building models and this movement from large models to small models?
Yeah, maybe we take the first part of the question. Why did we build our own models? It's really hard to control an end user experience in generative AI if you don't have control of the model. And, given that we had chosen the enterprise lane, right? Uptime matters, inference matters, cost at scale matters, accuracy really matters. And those things were all really deemed by us early on pretty hard to do if we're going to be dependent on other folks' models. And so we made the strategic decision for text, right? So multimodal ingestion, text production, so we can read a chart and, tell you what somebody's blood sediment rate is because we read it somewhere on the chart. We can analyze an ad and tell you if it was compliant to brand guidelines, but we're not producing imagery. So kind of the multimodal ingestion to text and insight production we made a strategic call almost a couple of years ago that we're going to continue to invest in remaining state of the art. And today, our models from the Palmyra X general model to our financial services model to our medical model are GPT-4, zero shot kind of equivalent. So when you pair that with folks' data, it's pretty magnificent. But, unlike other powerful models and other state-of-the-art models, this is a 72 bill model that can actually, sit inside of somebody's private cloud and not require a ton of resources. So, for us, it's been a whole host of things that has allowed us to be state of the art and still relatively small. I mean, obviously that's still a massive, internet scale model, but, everything from kind of the number of tokens the models have seen to just how we have trained them have helped us be super efficient. So those are all decisions that, really stem from that first strategic one, that really important problems are going to have to be connected to data that folks don't want leaving their cloud. And so to do that, we'd have to be in there, and it would have to be a model that could be efficient, right? And so wasn't going to have a bunch of different skills in one, right? And that's why we've got 18 different models, similar types of training data, not too dissimilar, right? But the skills that they are built for are different.
Right. And I think that, one point you made here, it makes me think of a LinkedIn post that you recently wrote, which was really, I think, illuminating in many ways. And so, you talked about unstructured data, right? And where Writer can actually go in using its models, you sit inside of an enterprise and take advantage of the data that the enterprise has, which is so important. This is something we hear a lot from companies is saying we need to be able to use our own data in a secure and efficient way when entering data into these models. Now, obviously, we're hearing a lot about RAG, retrieval augmented generation, and we're hearing a lot about vector databases, and there's a number of them have caught fire, and we're seeing a lot get funded and things like that. And I'm sure a number of the founders who listen to this podcast have either used or have played with a vector DB. You have an interesting perspective on RAG and vector DBs, especially from the enterprise perspective. Maybe you could share a little bit about the posts you wrote and the perspectives that you have around this tech.
Yeah, I don't want to be like the anti-vector DB founder. The thing that I wrote and what we do is really an output of just the experiences that we've had. If embeddings plus vector DB were the right approach for dynamic, kind of messy, really scaled, unstructured data in the enterprise, we'd be doing that. But it just didn't at scale really lead to outcomes that our customers thought were any good. And so a 50 document application, right? So a digital assistant where folks are querying across 100 or 200 pages across a couple of things, then vector DB embedding approach, fine. But that's not what most folks' data looks like. If you are building a digital assistant for nurses who are accessing both, a decade-long medical history against policies for a specific patient, right? Against best practice, against government regulation on treatment, against what the pharmaceutical is saying about the list of drugs that they are on, you just don't get the right answers when you are trying to chunk passages and pass them through a prompt into a model. And so you just get so much more detail when you're able to take a graph-based approach. And, folks associate words like ontologies with kind of old school approaches to knowledge management, but especially in the industries that we focus on in regulated markets, in healthcare and financial services, those have really served those organizations well in the age of generative AI because they've been just huge sources of data so that, we can actually parse through their content just much more efficiently and help folks get good answers. And when people don't have knowledge graphs built already, right? We've trained a separate LLM. It's seen billions of tokens, right? So this is like a skilled LLM that just does this, that actually builds up those relationships for them.
I was just going to say, no, you were saying that you don't want to be the anti-vector DB, and I don't think it's anti-vector DB. I think it's, things like chunking and vector DBs work for certain use cases. And I think what was interesting about your post was that, hey, from the enterprise perspective, you need a lot more context than what chunking can provide. And so I think it's helpful because a lot of the founders or, companies that are working on this very, these like narrow areas don't often see the enterprise perspective, right? Where all of this context really matters versus just some chunking. So did you get it? You probably got some interesting responses to that, right?
Yeah. I mean, there were a lot of folks who, both customers and folks that we're talking to who were like, thank you so much. I sent that to my boss. Thank you, God, And I'm a non-technical person. And so when I explain things to myself, I try to share it with other non-technical folks so that they also can understand it. And that actually helps technical people explain things to other technical people.
Yes.
So we definitely got a lot of folks reaching out in things. Now, of course, our customers know this already, right? But I do think we're in a moment in the market maturation where what the underlying kind of techniques, algorithms, technologies are really matter to people because they're seeking to understand. I think in a couple of years, when this is just a much more mature market, people will be talking solution language, right? Nobody buys Salesforce and is like, so what DB is under there? What are you using? Can I bring my own? But we're just not there in generative AI. And I think that's a good thing because you go kind of way deeper into the conversation. People are much better at understanding natural limitations. Nobody is signing up for things that just aren't possible. But I do think the other side to this conversation being so technical is there are a lot of people who don't know as much as they would like to and are now afraid to ask questions. We're seeing that a little bit, especially in the professional services market, where folks really need to come across as experts because they've got AI in all their marketing now, but it's just much harder to have kind of real grounded conversations.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I think, switching gears a little bit, I think talking about the commercial side is interesting because there's so many startups in AI, right? And there's so many technical products and technical founders and companies, but not many of them have actually broken into commercial sales. And fewer of those have broken into enterprise sales, right? And I know Ryder has customers like L'Oreal and Deloitte and a number of others, some of which we don't really associate with being first movers in tech and especially first movers in AI. And so maybe you can take us through a little bit of how Ryder approaches the commercial aspect of things in terms of getting all of this AI solutions in the hands of enterprise users. Maybe you can just take us through like the first few customers that Ryder was able to get and how you broke into this. What was the story behind that?
Our first company sold to big companies. So in the machine translation and localization era, Wasim and I sold to large companies. And we started off selling to startups. And then I can't remember, someone introduced us to Visa. And we're like, oh, that's an interesting set of problems, right? And it definitely, that was probably Cordoba circa like early 2016, right? And so, for like kind of 3 solid years, right, we penetrated enterprises with a machine translation solution that like hooked up to GitHub repos, and it was great. We just learned a ton about how companies work, and it really did give us this cross-functional bird's eye view of a bunch of processes. Because when you think about a company going into a new market, they take a whole slice of their business, right, kind of cross-functionally, and that now has to operate in that language. And once you're in kind of $100 million cost takeout land, it is really hard to go back to anything else. Like, our mid-market deals are six figures, and it's because of the impact, right, that you can have. Now, it does mean that it's harder to hire. So yes, we're under 200 people. I'd love to be 400 people. But, we are interviewing so many folks, dozens and dozens for every open role, because you really have to have a beginner's mindset and just this like real curiosity to understand the customer's business. No customer right now in generative AI wants to have somebody who's learning on the job on the other side of the phone. And the thing is, in generative AI, we're all learning on the job, right? Because this is such a dynamic space. The technology is moving so fast. The capabilities, right, are coming so fast. Even we were surprised at how quickly we got to just real high quality, right? We launched 32 languages in December, GA in Jan, and it was like, whoa, I really thought it would be a year before we were at that level of quality. All to say that we need people who can go really deep. Enterprise sales requires everybody in the company to speak customer, right? And not generic customer, but you're talking to CPG. It's a different conversation than retail. It's a different conversation than insurance. And really understanding how our customers see success, right? And it's not this use case or that use case. That's a real kind of underutilization of AI when you think about it that way. But what are the business outcomes they're trying to achieve? And really not just tying it to like get the deal done, right? But like actually making that happen faster than without you. That's what the whole company has to be committed to.
How do you find that profile? So, everyone's learning on the job in AI. And it's funny because you see all the YouTube shorts with people saying, I'll make you an expert in generative AI, which I don't even know what that means. But, I think most of us, suffice to say, the technology is moving so fast that, we're not experts. And many of us are learning on the job and as learning as things come through. And at the same time, you have to find a terrific sales leader or an AE or someone who not only understands AI and the product, but understands and can speak to enterprises. So hiring is difficult, but how do you find that person, or are there certain qualities or experiences that you look for that you think are the best fit for, the kind of sales culture and group that you're building at Ryder?
I think I would actually start with the customer success culture, because that was really hard to get to the right profile as well. And we really believe in hiring incredibly smart, curious, fast-moving, high clock speed people. And we're all going to learn what we need to learn together. So there's no like, oh, that was the wrong profile, fire everybody and let's hire the new profile, right? Like we don't do that. What I mean by profile is, what we need folks to do. And of course, over time, you refine the hiring profile so you don't have to interview so many people, right, to get to that right set of experiences and characteristics. And, on the post-sale side, we're really looking for end-to-end owners. Connect, challenge, own are our values. And, in customer success, it can be easy for folks to be happy that they got the renewal, or, yep, we're over like the data mile ratio that we need to be, or, we're just kind of going through a check the box exercise. And we have a 200% NRR business, and I think it's going to be a 400% NRR business soon. And that just doesn't happen unless you are maniacally focused on business outcomes, right? Not just like, am I in line to get this budget renewed, but like, have I actually made change happen? And you got to bust through walls, right? Like this is just a no excuses kind of culture. And it's necessary in generative AI because the gates come around all over, right? Like matrixed organizations are the enemy of generative AI, because how do you scale anything, right? The whole point of this transformation is that intelligence will now scale, and most organizations are just not set up for that. And so as a CSM, you got to navigate that with our set of champions and our set of technical owners inside of the customer. And that just requires like a real insistence, persistence, business acumen, right? And relationship builder who's also a generative AI expert, right? So it's a lot. And then on the sales side rather, it is definitely the generative AI expertise. And it's kind of a combination of like the hyperscaler salespeople swagger, right? And we don't hire from the hyperscalers. We interviewed a bunch of folks, but it's just like, it's kind of like a guaranteed budget item and a guaranteed like 7-figure salary for those sales folks. And so it hasn't really, and obviously the brands are humongous. The events budgets are humongous. So it just hasn't been the right profile. But like, we've loved the swagger, right? Like when you can talk digital transformation and you're not sort of like stuttering over those words, there's just a confidence, right? That like comes across. And so interviewing lots of different profiles has really helped us come up with ours. And it really is, growth mindset, humility, but real curiosity that does end up in a place of true expertise and knowledge about the customer's business, the vertical. We have potted up, right, in terms of verticalization. That's going to extend all the way into the product as well soon. And so my guess is most folks who are building go-to-market orgs in generative AI companies are doing more in a year than other companies do in 5, just because our buyer is changing, the process is changing. Yeah, it's a lot of work streams.
It's a lot. And I think I heard you drop the number 200% NRR or something in there, right? That is, I want to make sure I heard that correctly, because that's really incredible. And so hats off to the team.
209.
That's basically top 1% of 1%. It's interesting to contrast that with a lot of other AI companies that we've seen in the last 12 or 18 months, right? We've all heard stories of others where probably not enterprise focused Gen AI products, but the term Gen AI wrapper has been thrown around, and a lot of them have focused on more of the consumer use cases, and they've had incredible sort of early growth. And then in the last 6-12 months, we've also seen a pretty rapid decrease or a lot of churn. Is that something that you all had thought about early on in terms of the focus of Writer? Because I think given the hype we've seen in some of these other products, it probably would have been easy to say, hey, actually, maybe there's a lot of consumers out there. Maybe we should try this use case and see what happens. Obviously, those are fraught with a lot of problems too. And so did you think about that early as a founder trying to see what worked?
Yeah, about 15 months ago, around ChatGPT time, I think there was a real realization among our team, and we wrote a memo about it to everybody and sent it to our investors, that real high quality consumer grade multimodal was going to be free, and it was going to go scorched earth. That was really clear, and it has come to pass. The other kind of truths that we thought would manifest that we wrote about 15 months ago, like every system of record, right, coming up with adjacencies for AI, that the personal productivity market, right, would be eaten up by Microsoft. And so for us, what that really meant was, how do we build a moat that lasts years, right, while we deepen and expand the capabilities of the platform. And so what was already happening in the product around multifunctional usage, right, after somebody had come on, we basically were able to use that, right, to really position horizontal from the get-go. And so that got us into just a much more senior conversation. And we worked to really, buttress the ability of our platform to be hybrid cloud, right? Like we've got this concept of headless AI, where the apps themselves that you build can be in any cloud, right? The LLM can be anywhere. The whole thing can be in single tenant or customer managed clouds. And, that has taken 18 months to really come together. But those were really the roots, right? We're going to double down on enterprise, on security, on state-of-the-art models, right? That's what we're going to do. And we're going to do it in a way that makes it possible for folks to host the solution. But that, 100%, it came out of really seeing what everybody's working hard. So like kind of thin wrapper, I think even those companies have reinvented themselves, a lot of respect for them. But the differentiating in a world of hyperscalers, scorched earth, right? All the great things OpenAI is doing, right? Super, super innovative. And then every other startup trying to get a piece, right? That it really the bar for differentiation went way up 15 months ago for everybody.
Yes. Yes. Well, hats off on navigating the last 15, 18 months, in the way that you and the team have, because it's really incredible to see, compared to a lot of the other companies that, both on the big side and the small size, incumbents, startups that are all challenging different parts of the stack. 2 questions for you that are more founder related for you as a founder. Let's start with the first one. What is a challenge that came up unexpectedly, call it in the last 6 months, that you had to navigate, and how did you navigate it?
More than half the company today wasn't here 6 months ago. So 6 months ago was, we had just, I can't believe it's only been less than that. We had just closed the Series B. And, I think in the last few months, it's been just this transition from running the company to leading the company, if that makes sense. And so really then working with the entire executive team, right, around just naming, right, the behaviors, the inclinations, the types of decisions, right, that we wanted everybody to be making and to be empowered to make. And then really running just a really transparent org where information went to everybody pretty quickly, right? Like we've got a very competitive market that's really dynamic, that is also new. And so signal to noise has to be super high, or else everybody would end up spending 80% of their day reading the news, and being on Twitter. And so without me prescribing everything, right, we needed folks to make the right decisions based on the latest insights, the latest things customers and prospects were telling us, right? The latest things we were hearing, latest things product was working on. And just all those loops had to be super tight. And so, we got really good at, just with a lot of kindness, but insistence, like, this is taking too long, right? You're overthinking this, right? Inside the company, and that writer speed being something folks got accustomed to pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's execution and speed matters, right? Especially in this space.
Yeah. And execution while learning, right? So I think it's easier if you're like, all right, Q1 OKR is awesome. See you end of Q1, But this is a really dynamic space, right? And the hyperscalers are militant. This is really competitive.
All right, last one for you. What's the worst advice you've ever gotten as a founder?
Maybe worst advice that I've taken, and then worst advice I haven't taken. I think worst advice that I have taken was kind of early in Cordoba days, kind of hiring VPs before we were really ready. It felt like a constant state of rebuilding some function or other, on the executive team. And that's such a drain, right? Like, we have an amazing executive team. We've got strengths, we've got weaknesses. We're going to learn together. This is the team. And it's why we spend so long now to fill every gap, right? We've got a head of international, CFO, CMO. Those are searches that are ongoing. And we're going to take our time and find the right fit. But, those were hard-won lessons. And then, advice that we got recently, that we didn't take, were to not build our own models. And I'm really glad we didn't take that advice.
I was wondering if that might be something that came up, because you're right. I mean, we see so much activity around saying, hey, build on top of GPT, build on top of this open source model. And I think it works for, some set of companies. But as you say, thinking about moats early on in technology and IP moats from the very beginning is only going to help you in the long run. Well, thank you so much, May. Congrats on all of the success at Writer so far. I'm sure the journey's only beginning for you, and we're really excited to see where this goes.
Thank you so much, Vivek. For folks listening, we're hiring for literally everything you might imagine. So I'm May at Writer if this is interesting.
Perfect. Thanks so much.